Welcome everyone to session C1 of the 2023 Online Writing Centers Association virtual conference. My name is Jacqueline and I am the Assistant Treasurer of the OWCA. I'm going to be monitoring this session while Janelle manages the technology. During this session, our presenters, Catherine, Jonah, Claire, and Juan will facilitate this workshop entitled Multimodality and Welcoming Diverse Writers Online, Developing a Consulting Philosophy. So first of all, we're going to just take note of some basic participation guidelines. Please note that we are recording today's session. If you have a question but would prefer not to be recorded, please feel free to use the chat to communicate. Next, please note that we have sign language interpreters with us today from Moore Interpreting LLC. The interpreters will be spotlighted during the talk, but if you cannot see the interpreters at any point, please send a direct message via chat to the moderators. We ask that you refrain from turning on your own audio unless you are speaking. However, please feel free to post comments and questions to the chat at any time. And lastly, I'm just going to do a quick refresher on how to get to the chat in Zoom. You just select the chat button at the bottom of the Zoom screen, and a new window will appear with the chat window. I'm going to hand things over now to the presenters to go ahead and get us started.
Thank you. I will set up screen sharing. Okay, great. Well, thank you for joining us for our workshop, Multimodality and Welcoming Diverse Writers Online, Developing a Consulting Philosophy. I want to express appreciation to the OWCA team who has welcomed us here today and to our audience for attending our workshop. We are joining you from Auburn University, specifically the Office of University Writing. My name is Catherine Brown, and I am the Assistant Director of University Writing. I am joined by three of our wonderful graduate program assistants, Jonah Breed, Claire Hancock, and Juan Liu, who also serve as peer consultants in our Writing Center. Please notice that we have a link, aub.ie/OWCA, and a QR code on this slide. If you enter that link in your browser or follow the QR code, you will be able to download a PDF copy of our presentation. Jonah will also put the link in the chat so that you can click on it to access that presentation copy. During our workshop today, each of us will share a brief excerpt from our philosophy statements and consider how these statements prepared us to administer a writing center and tutor diverse learners online. We will each reflect on our identities and consider how we serve clients through principles grounded in diversity, equity, and inclusion. We will also guide audience members through brainstorming and planning their own philosophy statements, and we will have time for discussion and questions at the end. We begin this presentation with an overview of how we incorporate multimodality into consultants' professional development curriculum at University Writing, with a particular emphasis on diverse, equitable, and inclusive tutoring practices. As part of our professional development curriculum, consultants write philosophy statements in which they reflect on their identities, identify their core values, and consider how to enact these in various tutoring spaces. I will begin my portion of the presentation by reading to you an excerpt from my philosophy as a writing program administrator. As a white, queer writing program administrator, I maintain awareness of my identities to understand how they shape my work. Through a focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion, I work to create a welcoming working and learning environment for staff and students with diverse backgrounds and identities. By fostering community building and critical conversations amongst our staff, I seek to develop spaces where our employees and students feel a sense of belonging and recognize that they are valued and appreciated. Through writing this statement as part of my job application for my current position as assistant director, I considered how my identity as a queer woman influenced my drive to develop inclusive practices. And I explained how I would create an inclusive and welcoming environment at University Writing. This focus is infused throughout our consultant professional development curriculum and through a project I developed, affinity groups focused on LGBTQ inclusion and anti-racism, which Jonah will tell you more about later. To tell you more about University Writing, we are a writing across the curriculum, writing in the disciplines academic support unit at Auburn University, a large R1 public land-grant university in Alabama with over 30,000 students. University Writing is a large unit with 5 full-time administrators, 7 graduate program assistants, 2 undergraduate program assistants, and over 50 consultants and front desk representatives. Our office houses a number of programs. The largest of these is the Miller Writing Center, but we also have programs for graduate student writing support, as well as for faculty. One area of emphasis for University Writing is e-portfolios, a high-impact practice that we support in courses across campus. University Writing's ePortfolio project was developed as part of Auburn's Quality Enhancement Plan in 2012. University Writing supports academic programs and students across campus as they integrate ePortfolios. One way we support students as they develop ePortfolios is through tutoring in the Miller Writing Center, where we offer synchronous and asynchronous tutoring. Pre-pandemic, we primarily emphasized face-to-face tutoring, but with the pandemic, we expanded our online services. We offer over 300 hours of synchronous appointments per week, and writers can select whether to attend these appointments online or in person. This semester, we are piloting asynchronous tutoring with the aim to expand our offering in upcoming semesters. To support our consultants as they tutor ePortfolios and other writing projects in various modalities, we offer a professional development curriculum in which consultants explore multimodal pedagogies, write a consulting philosophy statement, and develop an ePortfolio. Throughout our consultant professional development curriculum, we seek to foreground diversity, equity, and inclusion by exploring the intersections between multimodality and DEI. By exploring these intersections, consultants are prepared to serve a diverse body of writers and to provide support to students' ePortfolios and other multimodal projects. One of the intersections between DEI and multimodality is located in how multimodality can shift writers' concepts of identity and meaning making. Multimodal writing projects, such as an ePortfolio, can center identity and invite students to reflect on how their identities shape their writing, their experiences within various contexts, and their alignment as allies and advocates for DEI. Furthermore, multimodality can shift concepts of what it means to write and to be a writer. Writing and social change are intricately connected, and multimodality can provide opportunities for students to write toward a new, more equitable future while utilizing their skills across modes. Throughout our professional development curriculum, we hope to emphasize that backgrounds and identities are assets to writing, tutoring, and learning, and to help consultants recognize opportunities to welcome clients with diverse identities to the Writing Center and to use inclusive tutoring strategies. We hope to provide consultants with the opportunity to consider the connections between writing, power, and social change, and to welcome and support clients' linguistic diversity and home literacies. Furthermore, we hope our consultants are equipped to transfer their knowledge across tutoring modalities while supporting multimodal writing projects. Online writing consultations, both synchronous and asynchronous, are inherently multimodal. Within online consultations, our consultants have identified challenges in developing rapport with clients, particularly the kind that has been documented as encouraging clients to ask meaningful questions and engage in reflection and deep learning. Consultants have also cited concerns about how they can recognize opportunities to utilize practices grounded in DEI, particularly online. Through assigning philosophy statements, we hope to invite consultants to consider these challenges and to develop practices grounded in DEI for online and in-person environments. In their philosophy statements, consultants reflect on their backgrounds and identities, identify their core values, and determine how to enact their values within consultations across modalities. During the presentations, you will hear from Jonah, Claire, and Juan. Each will share an excerpt from their philosophy statements. They will consider how they are serving diverse writers, such as LGBTQ, non-traditional, and multilingual learners, and they will share strategies they use to serve those writers online. As you learn from Jonah, Claire, and Juan, and begin considering your own philosophy statement, I also want to invite you to consider how writing philosophy statements can scaffold toward the collaborative development of a program vision statement. In summer 2022, our full-time team and our graduate assistants collaborated to write a brief vision statement which communicates our value for DEI. It states, University Writing's vision is to empower the Auburn community through diverse, equitable, and inclusive writing and instructional support. Now, Jonah will share with you how he has developed a consulting philosophy that addresses welcoming LGBTQ writers.
Right. Hey, everyone. Can y'all hear me okay? Awesome. Thank y'all for joining us today. I'm really excited to talk with you a little bit more about myself. I am a graduate assistant working with Auburn University in the through the University Writing Program. And as Catherine said, I'm going to share an excerpt from my philosophy statement. So first, I want to say that I am a white cishet graduate student, an educator. These are all identities that kind of informed how I approached my philosophy statement. So teaching and consulting involve working with writers with a range of identities in spaces that will continue to change form. It is my goal to center both the safety and growth of my students, regardless of identity or space, because I cannot and do not wish to fully control the conversations that happen in the spaces I educate in. I believe it is my responsibility to encourage agreements and expectations for conversations, whether they be online, in person, or elsewhere. So to talk a little bit more about how I kind of crafted this statement, I've worked with university writing in some capacity for the past almost 3 years. And a lot of that work has been with consultations through the Writing Center. And those spaces have changed over my time that I've been here. As Catherine said, with the pandemic starting, there was a big shift online. And I understand that kind of throughout my career, these spaces are going to continue to change, and I will always be working with students with a diverse range of identities. So it's my goal to make a space wherever I am to allow those students to embrace their identity and feel comfortable and grow as writers. And so that's kind of how I wrote this part of my philosophy statement. It's something I continue to revise as I get as my responsibilities change. But I really wanted this version of it to kind of be forward thinking. That's why at the end I said online, in person, or elsewhere, because I understand there will be new spaces throughout my career. All right, so let's talk a little bit more about spaces. As some of you are aware, in the literature, there is some discussion about the difference between brave and safe spaces. Kind of looking at Rao and Clemen's work in 2013, they define brave spaces as spaces that promote collaboratively setting expectations and rules for conversations instead of avoiding difficult topics altogether. A key aspect of brave spaces is the word collaboratively. It is not a space where one person sets these expectations saying that we can and can't talk about these topics. It is instead a joint effort in determining what is talked about, how is talked about, and ways to work through tough situations together. Safe spaces, on the other hand, aim to kind of provide protection, but can ultimately lead to people viewing safety as synonymous with comfort, which is not always the case. Writing center spaces, while we really want to ensure the safety and comfort of our clients, in those spaces, avoiding discussion of identity ends up erasing a part of students' identities, which can in turn affect how consultants and clients engage with the writing. If I'm working with a client and I decide that I think we're not going to talk about a certain aspect of that student's identity because it might be uncomfortable, that kind of takes something out of their writing that we can't work on or address, and might make the client feel alienated or invalidated. So it's important to have conversations with your client at the beginning of the appointment to kind of understand how you want to talk about embracing more difficult discussions about identity. So one way I wanted to improve my ability to foster these conversations is by participating in our pilot affinity group that was led by Catherine. It was one of two, and it was for the LGBTQ plus allies. In this group, we discussed a variety of LGBTQ plus centered topics about diversity, equity, and inclusion. We talked about representation in media, and we talked about kind of the different experiences we had growing up in different geographical locations with LGBTQ plus folks, and how the culture in our hometown was. That was really insightful because our group thankfully had kind of a very wide spread range of origin, and so it was interesting to hear how different where I grew up and was from other places. So I initially joined the group to further develop my teaching and consulting philosophy, as well as my pedagogical skills in both writing center and eventually ELA classroom spaces. I want to be able to have conversations with my students and my clients that embrace their identity and can talk through identity to make them better writers and be able to better express themselves through that medium. And so both the ELA classroom and the writing center are environments that center writing and identity. So let's talk a little bit more about spaces. Online spaces kind of complicate what counts, or online appointments somewhat complicate what counts as a space. The client I'm working with isn't sitting right beside me. We are talking through cameras working, cameras not working, microphones working, not working. There's a lot of different stuff in between me and my client when I'm working online. That doesn't mean that it's not a space that we share together. So online appointments change how consultants and clients establish a connection. There is no handshake when it's an online appointment. And so that kind of changes the way that consultants and clients work to establish that initial connection. There's a lot of technical difficulties sometimes that can change the way appointments go as well. But all that being said, a change in space does not have to mean a change in content. Just because I can't, or just because I might not be able to hear my client or I might not be able to see my client, doesn't mean that I need to say that, oh, I don't want to talk about this, or it's harder to talk about this just because of that. And in fact, I would argue that what online spaces do offer is a text chat, which is unique to online and is an effective method for establishing the expectations for a conversation that are prevalent and it's so key to creating brave spaces. So to conclude, I'd like to share with you an excerpt, or not an excerpt, an example message that you can use to greet clients when working with them online. So let me read that for you. Hey, client name. I hope you are doing well. I want to preface our appointment by acknowledging that writing is a very personal thing and connects directly to the writer's identity. My goal today is to aid you along your writing journey, and I understand that some topics may be hard to discuss. While I encourage discussion to foster growth, I am only one part of our appointment today. So if you have any expectations you would like to set for our conversation, please share them. This statement, I think, accomplishes a couple of things. First, it doesn't require a response from the client. So if they want to just continue the appointment without acknowledging the message, that's okay. You can greet each other and get started with the appointment. But if the client does have some expectations for the discussion or some direction they want it to go, this opens the door for them. It also emphasizes that the consultant is only one part of the conversation and that anything that goes on there is strictly collaborative. And so that really, again, gets back at creating a brave space where you can embrace difficult conversations if both parties are willing to, and that can really let you get at the core of some of your client's writing. So I think that this message is far from perfect, and there are plenty of ways to go about doing this. I just wanted to model that for y'all. So y'all could maybe try it in your own appointments. I'm now going to pass it to Claire, who's going to talk about non-traditional learners and how to support them. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Jonah. I appreciate that. And as you said, I will be talking about non-traditional learners. And to keep in with our theme of consulting philosophy, I'm going to go ahead and share an excerpt from my consulting philosophy. I'll go ahead and read that out loud. The experience of writing can be trying and discouraging, and the act of sharing that writing can reveal a sense of vulnerability. Thus, gaining the trust of my clients is incredibly important to me, and I take time to address progress, provide possible solutions, and celebrate successes to build that trust. As an employee, PhD student, and soon-to-be mother, I understand potentially competing identities, and I hope to build an environment of acceptance and validation from the very beginning. So to kind of walk you through how I built this, I wanted it to kind of mirror how most of my consultations go. So at the beginning, I do pick up on feelings of discouragement and vulnerability. Unfortunately, that can be how consultations for any clients can go, including non-traditional learners. But I also wanted to kind of include the rest of that organic thread there. So starting at that point, I start to integrate moments where I address progress, provide possible solutions, successes, to kind of build and get us off of that feeling of discouragement, which brings us kind of to the end of this excerpt saying keywords like acceptance and validation. So hopefully this kind of mirrors how I want consultations to go. Doesn't always happen, but that is what I strive for. So before we keep talking about non-traditional learners, let's go ahead and describe who they are, get some context going. So most of the time when you think about non-traditional students, it might be identified with age. Not really the case all the time. Age does kind of indicate if they're non-traditional or not, but the National Center for Education and Statistics has 3 descriptors that we can go by that are not related to age. So the first one is enrollment patterns. This is pretty much anyone who does not go to college or does not enroll in college directly after graduating high school. This could honestly be a year gap, 2 years gap, to a 20+ year gap. So even though someone might be of the typical college student age, they still might be a non-traditional student simply because they had a gap year or a couple of gap years there. Another descriptor is financial or family. So a non-traditional student could be full-time employed. Hopefully they're not working more than 30 to 40 hours, but they could be working up to 60 or 80. They could have one or multiple dependents, or they do also have family, but not dependents. So they have other family members to take care of, like parents, siblings, anything of that nature. And then finally, high school graduation status. So this is anyone who has not graduated high school with a high school diploma. Instead, they have a GED or a completion certificate. So like I said, these are the main 3 descriptors. It does not matter age, although typically if someone is coming into the college scene and they are older, they are most likely a non-traditional student. All right, so I mostly interact with, and this is why I have it on here, adult learners. I have seen older students that are non-traditional rather than younger. And I do want to note that I have mostly seen them in the virtual space. I have not seen very many at all in person in our writing center. I think I've seen like 1. And it makes sense, and we'll talk more about that as to why it makes sense later. But the virtual option absolutely gives them that flexibility in time and place as to when they can actually see a consultant on their writing. These clients come in with years of prior or current workforce experience and family responsibilities. These consultations have definitely impacted who I am as a consultant, because I sometimes can actually see the different identities or roles that my client has. Because, as I'm sure we've all experienced, we were talking about pets earlier, with Zoom as an option, we can see into somebody's domestic space or home, right? So it's interesting working on a professional level with an adult learner, a non-traditional student in that space, but also being able to see into their home. So a good example would be, I've seen clients where they're talking to their partner outside of the screen, or their partner comes in the screen. Or another example would be when a dependent is running around the background or comes into the forefront. It's very interesting for me as the consultant to have that extra element just come in and be reminded that this person has so many other identities than just student. Makes it a way more robust experience for me as a consultant. So to talk more about online options for non-traditional students, it is an awesome opportunity for them, simply because of the conflicting schedules, just not being able to be in multiple places at once. being able to be in that student role for 50 minutes, more or less, and then into a different role in the next minute. Another awesome thing about the online modality is that there are tools that present quick and efficient ways for non-traditional learners to more quickly have takeaways from the consultation, or be able to more effectively understand, like, moving forward what they should do. So in this case, a good example would be downloading the notes that you and the client have made, as well as the follow-up form afterwards being sent to their email. Awesome tools. The only downside to the online option is that there are some possibilities, non-traditional and traditional, that students may not understand the extent of what they need to be capable of, or at least understanding of, with the technology and the requirements for that. But with that just comes more opportunities to give additional assistance. So some tips for welcoming non-traditional clients online. There's a couple that you can do during the meeting. So what I would do is make sure that you've organized the meeting in a goal-oriented way. So maybe at the beginning, ask what the goals are. In the middle of it, or throughout, address those goals still. Maybe say, we've met this goal, or we're still trying to meet this goal. Let's get back on that. And then at the end of it, say, we've met these goals, or we still have to do this goal, but we can do that next time, or you can do this on your own. So just to make sure that they feel like their time has been spent well. And even if it was working towards goals, progress was still made. So as long as that feeling is communicated, I think that that's awesome for non-traditional learners. You can also offer opportunities for cognitive reframing. This kind of goes back to my philosophy statement, talking about that feeling of discouragement and vulnerability coming in. This can be said for a lot of different identities for students, but for non-traditional learners, they might really, really be stuck in that feeling of, I'm not good enough, or I should be better at this. So in this case, a good example of reframing would be if they said, this writing is just not going well. A way to kind of help them work around that or positively reframe it would be like, let's think of better ways to kind of communicate that. So maybe instead of saying this writing isn't going well, say something like, this writing is in draft format and it is exactly where it needs to be at this moment, and allow yourself to be okay with that and then move forward. Another thing that can happen during the meeting is briefly cover the range of online tools. This is very brief, but very important, just to kind of remind them that we do have tools that we can use and they can help you in these ways. And then just refer back to them throughout the meeting as well. And then finally, and I think that this is very important just because of the quickness between roles that they might be having to navigate. After the meeting, include a bulleted list, and then just organize the follow-up form as best you can to encourage self-advocacy moving forward. So in this case, it's a more streamlined way for them to figure out what they need to do moving forward on their own, and then also for them to look back at notes and go, okay, they said that I met these goals, I still have these goals to do, just to kind of quickly jog their memory. It just streamlines it for them into moving forward. So thank you for listening to me, and I will pass it on to Juan, who will be talking about multilingual writers.
Thank you, Claire. Hi, everyone. My name is Huan Liu. I'm from China. Currently, I'm working as a graduate assistant at the university writing at Auburn University. So nice to meet you here. So, Claire talked about the support for non-traditional students from Multimodal Writing Center. Now, I'm going to share my research and also my personal experience about the advantages of Multimodal Writing Center for multilingual writers, or let's say international students, and how we could empower peer consultants through training. All right, like Catherine, Jonah, and Claire, I will start my presentation with one excerpt of my philosophy statement as well. And I will read it for you, okay? As an international graduate student and multilingual writer, I found that if there is a welcoming and safe environment, I would be more willing to share my ideas. I want to provide such a place for diverse students too. So whenever I have appointments, I adjust my mood to be positive because it is easy for people to feel frustrated, upset, and desperate. The writing center could be a place to ease their writing difficulties with both academic and psychological support. That's what I got from there. Yeah, I think my consulting philosophy helped me realize the importance of writers' needs or multilingual writers' needs, and remind me of my goals for all the sessions I have. If we want to provide satisfied consultations for our clients, of course, we'd better to know what they need from these appointments, right? Now, I divided the needs of multilingual writers to two parts. The first part is, of course, language level. As we all know, multilingual learners, they care about the correction of grammar the most. Okay, whether this word I use it correctly or not, and the sentence structures are correct or not. All right. Even though there are maybe some other like difficulties about structure or format. I wanted to take like Asian culture and American writing, like English writing, as a like example. For example, in China or in Japan, these countries, we put topic sentence at the end of a paragraph or at the end of an essay paper. But in English, we usually put the topic sentence at the first paragraph or at the beginning of the whole writing, right? This is a big difference. And the other thing I think we need help is about the format. Like APA, MLA, or Chicago, we didn't have this kind of writing conventions in our culture. Yes. The second part is about the communication. Multilingual learners, they are afraid of opening their mouth to talk in English, even though I regard myself a kind of a proficiently English speaker, but sometimes I feel unconfident about my speaking ability as well. But so this is a really good opportunity for multilingual writers to practice speaking skills and also learn communication skills with in a different culture context. I have studied 5 different languages. Let's say English, Korean, Japanese, of course, Chinese, and Farsi. I agree with the Rafael that conversation is one of the best ways to learn another language. If I don't speak one language for a long time, I may forget how to pronounce certain words or how to organize sentences. On the contrary, if I practice more, I speak more fluently. So as a result, the second language learner, they will feel more willing to talk with others in English, in their language. That's is another reason why writing center is so important for multilingual writers, because tutors are peers and they are trained writers, right? When second language learners, they talk with professors or classmates, they still feel ashamed of their so-called poor English, or like they feel afraid of making mistakes in language. But they will feel more purposeful and more relaxed when they have consultations with peer consultants, because they are here to seeking help from writing. They need to express their ideas to others, right? And they also catch the information from others as well. So to meet the needs of multilingual writers, we developed multimodal writing center. Here are some more advantages, I think, for them specifically. Yes, thank you, Catherine. So first, multimodal writing center provides a coordinated system and more choices for clients. Compared to the past, multilingual writers can either book online or offline appointments. We already know all of this, right? They can schedule online or directly drop in for an appointment. And also they can get a writing suggestion feedback no matter whether they show up or not, with the choices of synchronous and asynchronous. In this case, this will help ease the multi-writer's nerves with time flexibility and comfortable space. I will take my own story as an example. I came to America in 2001 fall. I didn't buy a car almost for a year. But I was struggling for my writing as well. I need help from writing center. What if I need to go there, but I don't have a proper transportation? I either like spend $10 to take a taxi for one trip, or 40 minutes to 1 hour to take the school bus. You know what? I give up most of the time if there is no other choice instead of a physical appointment. So the online appointments and asynchronous choices give me so much freedom on the time and the space. I feel more comfortable stay at home to sometimes, feel nervous to be around the strangers. It happens. So that's really a great help that in this semester, university writing at Auburn University also offer asynchronous appointments. So this perfectly helped me to release my dilemma. If I want to get writing help from writing center, well, I have class or other important work to do. Yes. Now, except for the advantages of a multilingual writing center for multilingual writers, there are some other strategies that we can do for creating a harbor in online appointments. As I said in my personal philosophy statement, I valued this for creating a safe and a welcoming environment for my students very much. So first, send a greeting text to welcome them and their linguistic diversity. Here is an example. Okay, I will say, hi, dear student name. This is Juan. Welcome to Mina Writing Center. Nice to meet you. The Writing Center values perspective from individuals and the linguistic diversity of the world. So how may I help you in this appointment? After they read this, they will feel, okay, I can either speak in English or my mother language speaker, because we can copy the Chinese on Google search bar to find a translate version, right? So this will help us to communicate and to learn the language better. Second, we can also provide 1-minute video instructions on how to use multimodal writing center with different languages. It can be like can be an instructing video about how to make an appointments, or how to use online session icon steps, or how to conduct a synchronous appointments, right? Because some people from other countries may have never accessed online teaching. I didn't have the experience of taking online courses until 2021. Even during the COVID-19 in China, we just shut down all the schools, but we didn't have the online courses at that time. For me, I don't know anything about online or how to make appointments online. So I think we can do that. I mean, we can try it at least. Third, this is another example that I suggested peer consultants to talk with the students, to suggest them use the communication tools they feel comfortable. Like they can either typing on the text chatting place, or use voice talking, or just show up in the video. Great. Now I want to recap what I talked in my presentation. First, I talked about the needs from multilingual writers and what peer consultant can do. Here, I think we have two other things. The Media Writing Center at Auburn University did a really excellent job. First one is that the administrator, Lady Moran, she offered the professional development for all peer consultants to learn multilingual learners' features, needs, and how to help them explain themselves during the appointments for peer consultants. Also, we asked the multilingual writers to share their cultural and language differences to all peer consultants to help them others to better understand the differences between our students and the dominant culture in the writing. Okay, here are something administrators can do. For the first one is keep updating the multimodality of the writing center. We had the physical appointments, and then we have online appointments. Now we have asynchronous appointments, and they are something more, I think, in the future. Also, another thought I think all administrators can think of is that to guide how to get a peer consultant to have their consulting philosophy. Right now, I will stop here and I will hand my to Catherine. Thank you for listening.
Great. Well, I really enjoyed hearing Jonah, Claire, and Juan share about their consulting philosophy statements. And we will use the rest of our time to start brainstorming and developing your own philosophy statements. So to write a philosophy statement, we think the first step is to reflect on your core values. Core values can infuse the work you do throughout being a consultant or an administrator and make the work feel really meaningful on a personal level. So on this slide, each of us has noted some of our core values, and I want to invite you to take a couple minutes to think about what your core values are. You can read the core values on our slides. You can think about things that feel very meaningful to you. And when you have about 3 values in mind, I want to ask you to either follow this QR code or the link on the slide to share with us your core values. So Jonah will put that link in the chat, https:// you'll see it in the chat. It's the aub.ie/values link. So I'm going to just give you a few minutes to think through and share with us your values at that link. If you have any questions, please feel free to share those. So I have changed my screen share. I hope that you can see the word cloud that you have created now. Great, and you'll see it is shifting and moving a little bit. But what I like about this word cloud is that it shows us the top values in the largest font. So it looks like many people put empathy as one of their most important core values. And I'm wondering, is anyone comfortable sharing why you chose empathy as one of your core values and how you see that informing the work of the Writing Center? I know Jonah has empathy as one of his values. I also see compassion, collaboration, empowerment. So these feel like very student-centered values. Yes, I see a hand up. I would love to hear from you about your thoughts.
Yinka, I think she's speaking to you if you'd like to share.
Oh, thank you. So I was waiting to be called. Yeah, so I wrote empathy because life is hard. And so just knowing that, like I experience life in different ways. So when my students come, sometimes a number of them, they have writings to do, but at the same time, they are dealing with life that is impacting them negatively to do that writing. So empathy would make me shift a bit from the serious business of our writing to meet them where they are. Sometimes they just want to talk, then we get back into the writing. So I think empathy helps me to strike the balance between my professionalism and my humanity.
Thank you for sharing. I really love what you said about balancing, understanding that students are going through a lot, that they're struggling. So we may see them very stressed in a very difficult situation. And so meeting them with understanding and care is part of cultivating these relationships of empathy. So I really appreciated that. Thank you. And so I'm inspired by the core values that I see you all sharing here. There's emphasis on being intentional, being caring, supporting students, being open and patient, being honest as we connect with them, sharing humor, being inclusive, working toward equity, being attentive, developing a reciprocal relationship with students, sharing kindness and positivity. I see growth, which is interesting to me because I think everyone should be growing, not just the students, but the consultants and administrators as well. Sense of belonging, very important. Another reason to center diversity, equity, and inclusion. Understanding, authenticity. So thank you all for sharing these. I'm going to change my share back over to the PowerPoint. And Claire has some reflective questions she is going to give you next.
Yeah, I think we have enough time for 10 minutes on this, you think, Catherine? Okay, awesome. So in this part of the activity, we're not going to share what we write down, but I do want whatever we've reflected on to kind of carry you into our discussion that's next. So if you could consider these two questions: how do your identities shape the core values you identified, the ones that we just identified? And what do you intend consulting to do for your clients and for yourself? Let's spend about 10 minutes reflecting on that and writing, and then I'll kind of give you a heads up when we're close to wrapping that up. Let's start wrapping that up. That way we can start talking about the discussion questions that we have. A little bit shorter than 10 minutes, but that's perfectly fine. I think that whatever you have right now, even if you finished, great, will definitely be awesome for moving in. So I will hand that off to whoever is next.
So as you have written, these are some of the questions that we start our consultants to answering to work on building their own philosophy statement. So you've already started some of the building blocks toward that philosophy statement. But now we do have a reflective discussion question we'd like to ask you. How do you enact your core values and intentions as a peer consultant or administrator? We've heard from Jonah, Claire, and Juan, some of the ways they are enacting their values and drawing on their own identities to enact those values. But I would love to hear from anyone in the audience who's comfortable sharing. And you're welcome to unmute, you're welcome to use the chat to share. How do you enact your core values? Yes, Christopher.
Okay, hi. I think I was the one who said intentionality, and I was thinking mostly about And this is as an administrator, but intersecting with consultants. There's a lot of intentionality, as we all share, and how I welcome students into our space, how we, of course, how we plan training meetings, and how I interact with consultants. There's an intentionality about interacting with consultants in an informal way in one context or for one purpose, and in a more formal way, more officially, more socially, less socially, more, there's a lot of intentionality. And when I am in the studio space, we have a large space in the library. And so it's not like, I'm always immediately present. I'm not on top of them because, we have a huge space. So there's a lot of intentionality in that. And then the way it intersects with consultants is, I share a lot of that intentionality with them. Like my intentionality, sorry, just yesterday because we're in the library, a lot of our consultants will come in and spend time in the studio space when they're not working, just studying. And I was telling a consultant yesterday, when they're doing that, I will say hi, but I won't talk to them about work because it's not my, our time, it's not their work time, it's their study time. So I'll talk to them. So I'll say hi, and then I'll let them study. And I was sharing that with a consultant because I had just, previous to that conversation, I was sort of explaining a move that I made, which was there was another consultant who was coming on at 1:00, and it was like 7 minutes to 1. And I said, she's not on yet. It's because it wasn't her time to come on yet, and we had a writer waiting. And so I was explaining to this consultant the intentionality and saying, she's not on yet. We don't just ask someone to start working before they're being paid. Now, and then she volunteered to work, and then I said, that's fine, but make sure that you get paid for the coming on early. So that intentionality sort of works in a lot of different ways.
So I hear that informing a lot of levels of your work with your staff. So thank you, Christopher, for sharing. And I'd like to hear from any of you about this. How do you see yourself enacting your core values, specifically in the online environment? That's our second question. Let's be specific to the online environment. I'd love to hear thoughts.
Our center, I'm from the University of Nevada, Reno. I'm an administrator there. Our center offers online asynchronous modalities. So basically we provide targeted marginal comments and then like a friendly letter, like overall reviewing what was noticed during that appointment. And so in this modality specifically, me as an administrator kind of training our consultants into this type of work. And before I was an administrator, I was a peer consultant. So this is something that informed my work then and continues to inform it now. But mindfulness was something that I thought of as one of my core values. And I think it's especially important in those online, especially asynchronous modalities, considering, what you know about a student, and more importantly, often what you don't know about a student regarding their background, identities, projects. And so for me and our consultants here, this looks like offering options, verbalizing to students, like sometimes the limits of our own understanding. So here's what I am assuming in this moment based on what I have, and then offering the student options, to correct us in future appointments, or, kind of come back on any of those assumptions, and just being very clear about where is it that we're looking in these asynchronous modules to inform what we're providing back, so that students always have the option to inform us when they come back to our center again, what options work better for them, and what strategies they would like to enact with us when they visit us again. So mindfulness, especially in asynchronous settings, has been a huge part of our work, especially post-pandemic, as our online participation has gone way up, and we anticipate that it'll stay a pretty popular option. Yeah.
Thank you, Ali. I love the emphasis on mindfulness. I also see a comment in the chat, which I will read out. And just thinking through this comment, I see an emphasis on collaboration. So Sean said, I have developed a we philosophy in the Writing Center, even with our language. It's better to ask, what are we working on today, rather than what are you working on? Also, we refer to all of our student writers simply writers. It helps in building a community, especially online. Finally, I always turn on live captioning for our synchronous online sessions. There's some emphasis on accessibility too. So thank you, Sean, for sharing that. So we have just a few minutes left. And for our last few minutes, I'm going to turn it over to Jonah.
All right. Hey, everyone, again. Thank you so much for sharing. For the last few minutes, I've got a couple of questions here that you can respond to. I'll read those out loud. And then also, if you have any questions for any of us, we're happy to answer them. So do you utilize philosophy statements in your context? How do these shape how you serve diverse writers? How has the modality of your writing center changed? How is it changing? And how has your approach to consulting changed with asynchronous interactions in the writing center? As I said, feel free to respond to any of these via unmuting yourself or through the text chat, or feel free to ask any of us questions. A message from Christopher in the chat. One of my core values is growth. That shows up in how we introduce consultants to our asynchronous consultation modality, intentionality as well. For new consultants, I facilitate their growth by being Oh, it's okay. Sorry. Being intentional in the types of writing or genres they are assigned when they're first doing written feedback consultations. Yeah, so our writing center has just started doing asynchronous consultations. So thank you for sharing that. I personally haven't been trained on how to do those yet, and so I'm really interested because I think it is selecting and like being intentional with what they're assigned. Seems like you could kind of give certain consultants like stuff that they're stronger at whenever you're assigning those, which seems like an interesting way to approach that.
I'll jump in and clarify real quick.
Yeah, sure.
So because it's pretty standard for when someone is new to online consult to written feedback. We get a lot of first year writing, so they're already familiar with the first year writing assignments. We get a lot of resumes and application materials, so personal statements. So I'll select those for someone who's new to written feedback consultations because they're very familiar with those types of writing already because they've worked with them in our in-person modality. Because they don't take on written feedback immediately. They take on in-person first. So that's what I mean by selective. It's those that they're familiar with and not something that's too terribly long because then they can spend most of their time thinking and writing rather than reading. So no, 10-page research papers, more 3 to 4 page first year writing papers or resumes or personal statements.
Gotcha. Yeah, thank you for clarifying that. I think that some of those like longer form assignments are maybe more specific to a certain field. Pieces of research writing can be really, they're definitely intimidating in synchronous in-person appointments. And so they can be really challenging, especially for new consultants in the asynchronous space. So yeah, I think starting with stuff that people are really familiar with is a great way to kind of scaffold them into working on more challenging assignments and pieces of writing later on. Catherine. Okay, well, thank you, everyone. I know we're running short on time, but thank you so much for participating. I had a great time talking with y'all, and I hope that everyone has a great rest of their week and time at the conference.